again, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of SCLC Today TV. I'm your host, Maynard Eaton, but of course, we're joined by our president and CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. Dr. Steele, politically, the country, the nation's in an uproar over the America's pullout from Afghanistan. Some say President Biden blew it. You're an international leader. What do you say?
Well, again, Maynard, it goes on relationships, and you do have turmoil in terms of the international culture and politics. What I think is that President Biden meant well, but I think he had his own insight and his vision in terms of coming out of Afghanistan, but I think he lacked the respectability of the leadership of others. And, that's just everyday concern that I have with people generally. You might have the perfect plan, but you have to also be able to collaborate and communicate with people who's on the ground. I mean, regardless if you're the president of the United States of America, if you're not on the ground, you have to listen to the experience. Rick Clear and I were just talking earlier off camera about people having experience and a track record of knowing what they're talking about. How do you do that, Steele? By being indoctrinated over a period of time and understanding what the focus point is. So President Biden meant well, and I understand where he was coming from. But the infrastructure of listening to people on the ground who've been indoctrinated for many of years and studied this type of behavior of different cultures, dealing with the Taliban as well as the regular citizen of Afghanistan in terms of their history. These folks have been fighting for years. They're warlords.
Right.
The ones who,
Right.
Mr. Eden, they are warlords. Like you studied journalism and your profession and what you do, not just going to school, but the foundation of your calling. That's what you do every day. I know that. You communicate with me 1 o'clock at night because you study that stuff. So, how am I to say, well, Maynard, stop calling me or texting me or emailing me 1 o'clock at night because I trust your judgment. That's where I think President Biden fell short.
Dr. Steele, you're a Christian. There are those who suggest we're a Christian organization. Those critics have said it was inhumane and non-Christian-like to leave folks scrambling for their safety, scrambling for their lives. It looks horrific when you look at the pictures.
Right. Well, but it wasn't intentional. It was lack of preparation. And you mentioned being a Christian. That's throughout the world. People who do not travel internationally or domestically, nationally, they don't understand being a Christian or standing up for what God wants us to stand up for and dealing with the Holy Spiritness that should motivate all of us. You don't understand what Christians go through. Over in Afghanistan, over in Nigeria, just those two locations, geographically in this country, we don't understand the international sentiment of the various cultures. Those folks in Afghanistan who are labeling themselves as Taliban, they are warlords. They don't care about peace. They are trained to kill folks.
Dr. Steele, I know you are married to a dynamic woman, but the First Lady wanted me to ask you about, and you're a father of 2 daughters, the fate of women there in Afghanistan, their future, their fate. I mean, it seems like they were in school, doing well, progressing. Now it seems like a retrenchment, a retreat. Women, their fate, your thoughts.
Well, it's really terrible terribly so. And I'm thinking, how can a father of a young girl or young lady go along and abide with what is taking place with the discriminatory and inhumane treatment of women in Afghanistan? How can you allow this, and you the father and grandfather of these women and girls? One thing, Maynard, is that it's a disrespect to the human race. It's a situation where I was just leveled to the ground when I heard that this particular Taliban individual came up to this particular young lady and her husband, and he liked the young lady, and he killed her husband so he could take her off to marry her in front of her mother. This is the culture of this type of negativity in terms of the daily lives that the Taliban lives. How in the world can we allow this to go on this planet called Earth if we consider ourselves Christians? I think it's an excellent opportunity for Christians to stand up. That's what I say. Worldwide. If they find a Bible, any literature related to the movement of Christianity, they will go to this home of the individuals and they murder them, assault them, and kill them. That's un-American, but it's also undemocratic, and they don't care because they are born in their mind and embedded in their heart that they are warlords. And that's complete control, absolute control, and that's what they exemplify.
Speaking of control, are we losing control over this war here at home about whether to wear a mask or not? Parents are fighting in schools across the country about whether their children should wear masks. This variant has blown up again. In your home state of Alabama, there are no more hospital beds left. Where are we with the mask, no mask, this variant? We're back at square one almost, it seems like we were a year more ago.
You're talking about inhumane, talking about Afghanistan. Violence is violence. You know what I'm saying? That's a violent act for anyone to go and say you shouldn't protect yourself from the enemy. That's just like going in front of the Taliban. Ain't no different, because if you're dead, you're dead. Going in front of the Taliban and putting down your rifles and your armor gear and running like they did. That's cowardness. That's cowardness. And you're fighting an enemy. For anyone to say and not have a mandate in terms of leadership and politics, and regardless of what party you might belong to. And I give credit to the governor of Alabama, Miss Ivy, when she came out several days ago and said the people who have not gotten their shots are responsible for the reoccurrence of setting us back with this dangerously virus that we're fighting from day to day.
Talking about politics, I guess that's all we've been talking about so far today: national, international, now it's kind of local and national. The state of Georgia has taken over Fulton County's right, or about to run an election. Certain clergy are outraged at that. They're suggesting what's happening in Georgia is symptomatic across the country about the government, state, national, taking over local elections and discriminating against black folks.
It's ludicrous, Mr. Eden, and I still say we're reacting rather than being proactive when we should have been out there 9-10 years ago. This happened 8 years ago when the U.S. Supreme Court gutted Section 4 and Section 5 of the 1965 Voter Rights Act. When you eliminate pre-clearance, it's all over, my brother. You're going back to state rights. You're going back to Jim Crow. So we should have been marching and demonstrating when we were there at the U.S. Supreme Court, not inside, but outside. And I'm redundant when I say it. Senator Hank Sanders, along with others, along with his wife, Fire Rose, We were there with 50 to 60 other people saying, don't gut Section 4 and Section 5 of the 1965 Voter Rights Act. And it's amazing to me that now people just realize what happened. This should be a lesson taught. You know, we need another Emancipation Proclamation because we have gone back 50, 60 years from which we have come.
Well, now, you know, politicians in D.C. and across the country are fighting over trying to get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed. It's being filibustered. But that's what's going on now politically, and preachers across the country, at least several I talked to today, suggesting that while the letter to the Birmingham jail, Dr. King said he respected the KKK because he knew where they were coming from, as opposed to today, moderates, you don't know where they're going with regard to that bill or other bills. They're just playing in the middle, you know. Where are we now? John Lewis Voting Rights Act, no, we should have acted 8 years ago, but isn't that the best hope we have today?
Well, first of all, you say, where are we today? My cliche is with impactfulness, seriousness coming from Charles Steele Jr. is politics has never freed the oppressed. The oppressed has always freed politics to make them do what is right. You're not going to have politicians like over in Afghanistan. You know, they doing it in a violent kind of way, you know, but the politics in terms of the Taliban, the politics to them is not what they want to recognize in terms of being official. So they ran the politicians away violently. In other words, we stood up to the politicians non-violently. Do you hear me, Mr. Eden? We stood up non-violently. That's the difference. And we ran the politicians away. And how did you do that, Steele? We did it because you had Dr. King at the time. You had the other civil rights leaders. You had Reverend Abernathy, Dr. Joseph Lowry, Reverend Fred Shuttleworth. They wasn't afraid of anything. Like they ran over in Afghanistan. The civil rights movement never ran. SCLC never ran away from a fight. Non-violently. A non-violently fight. And that's the difference. You got to have a non-violent movement and you got to have training. But politics can't do it. The movement has to do it. The oppressed must come together. Poor white folks, poor black folks, middle-class black folks, middle-class white folks, middle-class people who want to stand for justice and equality. We all must come together and collaborate. That's how you clean up politics.
Dr. Steele, I asked some preachers today, and as you well know, of course, SCLC has been led by powerful preachers from Dr. King on down to Reverend Abernathy and Dr. Lowry, and you've been in the pulpit more than once yourself. But is the pulpit, is there power still in the pulpit? Are preachers still the voice of the people? Are they still leading people? Are they bringing prophetic fire to the issues you now lament?
Well, you like to throw me the tough question, but I would love to answer too. That's why you're my friend. Maynard, what we must realize is that we must remember the past, but we can't stay in the past. It's a different calling now. It's a different calling now. And people are more diverse. And let me just say this. African Americans, black folks are not monolithic, meaning we just not all church folks. We just not all street folks. We just not all in the education. We just not all into any particular venue culturally that people were years ago. You know, we all came on separate ships during the transatlantic African slave trade, but we in different boats now. And the boats are smaller than ships. And you got a lot of captains out there. What we must realize is that God is everywhere. God is everywhere. But we have to support the black church. But the black church must realize God is everywhere. We cannot be fearful. Let me just tell you a story, Miss E. It was a young man, a great preacher, who was preaching about the drugs and the gangs in the community. And the gang folks came together. You know, they come together quicker than church folks. The corrupt folks, you know, the gang folks, you know, and the drug pushers. And they said, we're going to get this preacher. We're going to get this preacher. He ain't going to be talking about us because we making big money. So they followed him, and he was having revival. They followed him, Mr. Eden. They followed him from his house. He got in his car and going to his church. But he stopped at a red light, and they pulled him out of his car and drove the car over on a dark street. And they began to pull out their weapons, their knives and their guns, and they said, we're going to eliminate him tonight. But all of a sudden, they started running. I mean, they just started running. And the next night, the preacher said, well, I'm carrying on this revival. I'm going to church tomorrow. They know who is going to keep me from doing the Lord's work. When he opened the doors of the church the next night at revival, there was one individual that came down. And the preacher looked and he said, I know you. You were one of the ones going to kill me last night, going to stick me up and get rid of me. He said, and now you here the next night and you going to join the church. Tell me your story, brother. He said, well, when we came out and we had collaborated and we were going to destroy you and get rid of you, we saw some giants around you. He said they were tall and they were big. And he said, you didn't see them, but we saw them. They were invisible to you, but we saw them and we ran. And I said, that must be a man of God, because God put some giants from the heavens, giants, angels of giantness around him. They put hedges around this preacher. We saw them, but the preacher didn't. But the preacher believed that the Lord was going to deliver him. He was not afraid. That's what I'm saying. We got to step out after we do our spiritual commitment and obligations, and rightfully so. The church is the number one priority that we as African Americans need to continue to have homage to and respect for. But after we have service and worship, my friend, that's what was wrong with Cain and Abel in the Bible. You know, you got to worship the Lord. You know, the wishfulness and not playing with the Lord. That's why one brother killed the other brother, and the other brother was able to survive, because the Lord said he came to me the right way. You got to come to the Lord the right way. I don't care who you are. And he put his hedges around you. Oh, the church said amen. And I
preach, Dr. Steele, preach.
I'm not preaching. I'm just giving facts. You know, my wife said today, she came in and she, about 5 o'clock this morning, wanted to know where I was. You know, you got out the bed, weren't you? I was right there reading my Bible. Read my Bible. 5 o'clock in the morning with no disturbance. But why are you telling us that, Steele? You got to know the Lord for yourself, and you cannot be afraid.
Wow, that's a good lesson. Good story, too. But I want to end this on one note. Again, another pastor said to me today, with all that's going on in the world, the earth is crying out. There are floods, there are earthquakes, and there's fire. He said, the Bible says the stones are crying, and we cannot be quiet. Are we at a particularly critical point in our life now, you think?
Very much so. You know, the Lord controls everything, but he also is one of the greatest teachers. You know, he could stop all of this, but he's not going to do it. Not right now, because it's a teachable moment at this particular time where God said, I'm tired of all folks, not white folks, green, red, yellow, blue, all folks. I'm tired of y'all playing games and doing the same old routine that you've been doing for many of years. People rest on their laurels and their priorities. Their priorities in the wrong place. Do you know people respect entertainers more than they respect Christians or church folks? Because you can look at the way people live and the way they dress. The way I know who you are is the way you come to me in your dress and your mannerism and the way you open the door. Let me tell you how you can tell a good person from a bad person, male or female, man or woman. When you're going into a store and a person see you coming in, you right there at the door and they don't hold the door for you. Man or woman. Man or woman. You owe that. You owe that to the next person to hold it up. You know what I do? Immediately, Mr. Eden, I have it conceived in my mind. That's a bad person. That's a person who doesn't care about others. And that's why we're having so many problems today. It's a teachable moment, not only for God, because God going to do his thing. We need to learn what frustrates me. We go through all these catastrophic things and experiences, and we don't learn nothing.
There you go. Dr. Charles Steele Jr., thank you for teaching and preaching tonight. We learned something from you today. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been SCLC Today TV with our President and CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. See you next week.